Hello there, welcome to John's Book Club, and through these videos I hope to inspire you to go on some adventures with your reading and maybe check out some great writing and authors from all over the world. Hello there, I'm John Siddique, and in this week's book club there will be talk of books. Rule 1 of book club is we will talk of books. So I want to just get straight to it, and the short story we looked at this week was In the Circular Ruins by Jorge Borges. Borges was born in Argentina in 1899, and these stories were written, into kind of the 20s, 30s, 40s, I think, and he's a very interesting writer in that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but he never wrote any kind of big works, any novels or anything like that. All of his pieces are very, very small, little short stories, 4 or 5 pages, sort of parables, meditations, strange sort of mythic tellings. And that's what this piece is, The Circular Ruins. Let me just read you a little bit of this. The purpose which guided him was not impossible, though it was supernatural. He wanted to dream a man. He wanted to dream him with minute integrity and insert him into reality. This magical project had exhausted the entire content of his soul. If someone had asked him his own name or any trait of his previous life, he would not have been able to answer. The uninhabited and broken temple suited him, for it was the minimum of a visible world. The nearness of the peasants also suited him, for they would see that his frugal necessities were supplied. The rice and fruit of their tribute were sufficient sustenance for his body, consecrated to the sole task of sleeping and dreaming. So there you go. And so in this story, this character arrives in these ruins in seemingly a jungle and has this dream, or works by working with dream in order to, he says he wants to create a man, a perfect human being that will kind of go beyond and kind of move on and create beings of his own. And at first, without telling you too much, just the opening of the story, he enters into dream state and tries answering questions, and he almost like puts himself like a kind of professor and kind of starts answering questions from these kind of a massive assembled audience. Of somehow their questions and their kind of feeling will kind of create this being. It kind of spreads out to everybody to try and kind of take from all. Then that doesn't work, so he tries again, and he picks one person out of this dream audience and then tries to answer their oppositions, their questions, their way of doing things, and that doesn't work. And then, letting all that go, he just tries to sleep and dream more and more and more, and eventually starts kind of just visualizing and creating a human heart in all its detail, and then the story kind of grows from there. And these videos are based on the book group that I run for the Royal Literary Fund. So every Thursday we meet in Bradford, Waterstones, and I bring the materials that I'm sharing with you along, and I read to them, and then we kind of discuss. And there's no way we could have introduced a story like this kind of way back at the beginning of the group. But now what's really interesting is that as you kind of learn to kind of sit with literature a little bit more, you don't just come down to, yes, I like that, no, I don't like that. You allow yourself to kind of access things at a deeper level, even if you're just questioning yourself of, well, why do I not like that, or why do I like it? what's very interesting about this, and this kind of came up in our conversations, is that this story is very much seems to be a kind of telling of the Prometheus myth. You know, Prometheus stole fire from the gods so that he could have his own creativity. And you know, the most famous telling of that, of course, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is not like Frankenstein, and yet it is like Frankenstein in some ways. There are, you know, some parallels. Now, literally, it's a 4-page story, 2,200 words. So it's very easy going. But the language, maybe it's the translation, but the language is a little bit high and seems to be a little bit impenetrable at times. But then underneath it, the myth kind of carries you through. So if you find yourself struggling with it, and it might just be the translator, if you find yourself struggling with it, just try to connect to the myth underneath and what's going on. For me, I felt that this could possibly be about the act of creation, of writing, or of creating a work of art, in that you do literally have to kind of take the fire from the gods and kind of make it into something. And, you know, when we first try to write, we try to write to please everybody, and that just does not work at all. And then we settle down to the idea of like what we might call the ideal reader, somebody that we're writing the book for, you know, and we're trying to answer their questions. And that works to a degree, but at the end of the day, it still has to be your own heart creation, and the thing that you create, a book, a painting, a photograph that you make, if you know, a sculpture, if it's art, if it's actually art, then it has to have its own aliveness, it has to have its own intrinsic life. And I think, you know, that's one of the ways of kind of knowing what's art and what's not art, is that it has a kind of an intrinsic life of its own. And one of the ways that I used to recognize that a piece of mine was finished would be that it actually felt like it had a life of its own, you know. So that's Borges, really worth checking out. And this book is Labyrinths, which is a collection of his writings. He wrote many other things too, but if you want a really good grounding, then this is the place to start, I think. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to just stick to one anthology, because a really good way of getting a little deeper into poetry. I know a lot of people are poetry phobic or struggle a bit with the P word. And so one good way to get into reading a bit more poetry is to give yourself a kind of a wide spread of it. So get yourself a decent anthology, you know, look for recommendations, and maybe I can recommend some things to you. We're going to do this over the kind of coming weeks and months, some more that will kind of feature anthologies a lot more. And then just kind of, you know, put it next to the loo if you read when you're in the loo or on the loo, and or put it next to the bed and read a poem every morning or every night, and just make a little note perhaps, or, you know, at the back of the book or whatever. I don't mind writing in books, but if that horrifies you, then you know, come up with your own little system. And make a note of the writers or the poems that you kind of enjoyed, you know, and then maybe check out some more things by those poets, kind of when you've kind of, you know, done with the anthology that you're in. So that's quite a good way to kind of, you know, take your reading a bit further and to kind of deepen into poetry. And if there's somebody's poems that you've come across, 4 or 5 of them in different anthologies and things like that, not that everybody is in anthologies, of course, because it's actually a very interesting world of getting published and who's chosen and who's not chosen, which I won't get into right now. But maybe check out kind of one of their sort of single volumes, and that's the way to kind of lead into that. So today we're going to look at, and for the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at this book, Out of Bounds, which is published by Bloodaxe. And before we get into it, I just wanted to share with you that this book is actually based on, the whole book is actually based on an idea of mine, which is not why I chose it, but it just is that I have a kind of a close relationship with this book. I'm not the editor. It's edited by Jackie Kay, James Proctor, and Gemma Robinson. But Gemma actually read a very old poem of mine called A Map of Rochdale, which was in my second book, Northern Soul. And in that poem, I walk through the streets of my hometown, and instead of calling them Regent Street, John Street, Yorkshire Street, which are the names of actual streets, that I lived on and kind of walked along, I renamed the streets after my own experience of them, or after things that had happened there. And this made for a really interesting idea. What if you created a book that, particularly, it has a kind of a subtitle, British Black and Asian Poets, which is not something I like. I'm not a box to be ticked, I have to say. Neither is anybody else that I've ever met. So I hate, sometimes I feel like these things can be box ticking exercises, and there's a kind of, there's an Arts Council grant if you will tick the right box, which doesn't mean that people don't need publishing and that they don't need representing, but perhaps kind of, grouping a load of poems together and then that's it for 10 years is not necessarily the thing, and then there'll be another book in 10 years time, kind of thing that will get put on a special shelf in the bookshop. This is actually a very good anthology of poets living and working in this country, in Britain, and how their eye, the eye of somebody who might look at things a little differently to you, one from being a poet and two from being kind of having kind of like a kind of a wide cultural palette to draw upon, might show you things. One little rule that we have with the RLF is that the writers who run the groups don't share their own work. So this was quite interesting because here's a book based on my work, and I can't read the poem out. So somebody took the book out of my hands and read it out, but I can read it to you because these are my videos based on what we're doing, and it's kind of they're not official, as it were. So I'll read you a map of Rochdale, and then we'll get into the poem that I want to share with you, which is by Sandeep Parmar. A map of Rochdale. We are not London or Germany. The war barely touched us here. I'm drained by illusions and distances, signs to twin towns hundreds of miles away, replicas of clock towers, the clone shop confusion of every town high street. Let us make our own map of the sprawl, its life and ours, a bit unseemly and tough, filled with early sexual adventures stemming from boredom and flesh, politics grown from isolation and inverted snobbery. We'll rename the streets after their real stories: Smackhead Valley, Skinhead Avenue, Race Riot Street. Touch Me There Road, Drug Deal Walk, First Kiss Gardens, Pissed Up Lane, Possibility Fields. So you get the idea. And the funny thing about Rochdale Town Centre, I was born and brought up in the town of Rochdale, is that in the middle of the town there are all these, in front of the town hall is a sign, and it says, sort of Germany this way, London this way. It's quite bizarre. Anyway, so we each bring our own stories to each street. If you've ever been in love, or think about to when you've been in love and the street that person that you loved lived on, that becomes their street. If you've ever been mugged, then that street that you were hurt on holds fear for you, and kind of has resonance in the body. Even if you kind of work with that and you do what you need to do to kind of clean that trauma out of your body, still there may be a resonance afterwards. And so that street will forevermore kind of be associated with that. So that's the kind of thinking, in a way. But this is also just to kind of look at the fabric of this country. And so Archive for a Daughter is a very long poem, or quite a long poem. And I don't know if it's after a death, but basically the poet, Sandeep, is... she's going through boxes and folders and kind of looking at her mum's stories or journals or photographs, and imagine that you'd come into possession of all these things, and this person had somehow tried to order stuff into different folders and files, but there wasn't quite enough information. So you're just going through, and there's just this kind of act of discovery, these moments of love, these moments of what's going on here, of projecting your own kind of ideas onto kind of what's going on. It's really moves around. It looks like a difficult-ish poem to read, but actually she's very, very precise with her imagery, and it's very, very beautiful. And she uses musicality in a really good way, Here, just listen to sort of the first half of the poem.
November 1972, Derby. A dance card embalmed in sweat. Her ruthless curve of palm mowing the carpet into sheaves before a gas fire. Liquidescent virgin in a purple dress. Oil paint, shaded avocado, umbrella sun wings. Box 2, folder 20, early married life. A single page. Recto. A fashionable centre parting. Verso. Consonants. Midnight affair, nuclear affair, bleach affair. Watermark, indecipherable. But here we are jumping ahead. The archivist notes that no exact birth date is known. An already Western-dressed 6-year-old reads the headlines of English newspapers for party tricks. Her black eyes are blunt and unequivocal, like the prophecies of pharaohs. In a Punjabi village, she and her impeccable mother, gemstoned, auricular, princess of vernal causeway. Box 1, folder 2, emigration. The BOAC stewardesses Max Factor crinkle baskets of sweets to soothe the girl's swinging, impatient feet. Aviation, a risky endeavour in 1963, levels a curse at her progeny. Aerophobia, her own daughter's fear of the air between home and exile collapsing. Box 1, folder 7, education. Homeland's Grammar School for Girls. Miss Moore leans across an oak sea and parakeets a line of future mothers. Her bovine sympathies neatly pressed, tentacled towards the only Indian in the class, the Georgian battle cross marking her forehead, kindly and thoughtfully segregates.
And and then later on there's these, there's things like these wonderful images which, if Sandeep was a novelist, she might write pages and pages just to say this, but just the way that she uses these single words like this: nursery, pram, groceries, pram, doctor's visit, cucumbers in half lengths. It's like trying to go out shopping, trying to go to the doctor's with a pram, and all the difficulties and kind of the strangeness that kind of brings. And she manages it with kind of just a handful of words. And even though it's a very sort of seemingly fragmentary sort of poem, we get a kind of a picture in between the spaces, a feeling in between the spaces of these lives, and kind of travel and the country. It's really beautiful. So let me love you and leave you. We'll be looking at Outer Bounds again next week, another poem from here. And then in a few weeks' time, we're going to have, after the Easter holidays, we're just going to take a week off for Easter, and then we're going to have a Pablo Neruda special. So that's something to look forward to. And I'm telling you, but the group doesn't know that. So now they're going to watch this, and because I always try to keep things secret. So anyway, I've blown it now. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up because YouTube really like that. Please share it with anybody else who's a bookworm and you kind of you just would like to share. Leave us a comment down below. Tell us how you get on with the pieces when you read them. Tell us what you're reading at the moment if you want to. Make us some suggestions for things that we could have a look at that are kind of, you know, interesting reading. We're particularly interested in kind of broadening out our reading to kind of go much more around the world. I would like to, and one day I'd like to kind of run a group for a period of time where we have literature from every country in the world. That would be a heck of a thing. I do the best I can with this. And I'm not sure I can even get hold of literature. There was somebody who did this a while back, didn't she? She read a book from every country in the world. I'm trying to think who that is. Anyway, that's an aside. Leave us a comment down below. And if you're watching on other channels, Facebook or wherever kind of thing, then please note that Facebook in particular are trying to kind of not let anybody use links from outside, from other places. They're kind of pushing the posts down so that nobody sees them, which is a real shame, actually, because you know, we use different tools for different things, and Google and Facebook seem to be fighting with each other, and they want you to kind of just stay within their ecosphere. And actually, I just want to use the best tool for the job that I need, and have people be able to access things if they want to. So, you know, please subscribe to this channel. That's what I'm saying, on YouTube, and then click the notifications bell, and then you'll know when there's a new video. There'll be some more of the spiritual videos soon, maybe some juice recipes and things, because I'm thinking about that at the minute. Have a brilliant day. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.